Welcome to the T-Pac Arcade. Today's game is Xevious for the Nintendo Entertainment System. In this 1988 shoot-'em-up from Namco, the Xevians are invading Earth, and our only hope is the Xevious spacecraft and its zapper cannon and blaster bombs. Xevious is one of the key games that revolutionized the space shooter genre, breaking it out from standard fixed-screen enemy set elimination games to scrolling adventures with bosses, level variety, and a much more definitive sense of progression. And yet, it retains a lot of that early fixed shooter feel, placing it in a bit of a nebulous evolutionary point between its early 80s and late 80s brethren, sorta like a Jurassic period fish with a lizard tail and 2/3 of a bird wing. The kind of abomination that would probably be named Xevious and would aggressively squawk at you while flailing around with its under-evolved limbs. Like early-era shooters, Xevious loops indefinitely and places an emphasis on high scores. But like later shooters, it progresses you through a set of distinct levels within the loop. The weapon system here also straddles both eras. Your standard blaster takes out flying enemies and has no upgrades, but you also get a secondary bomb attack for ground-based turrets. There's even a helpful crosshair in front of your ship to indicate where bombs will detonate. And you'll want to line that target up well to take out the more aggressive cannons as soon as they appear on screen, because otherwise the playfield is bound to get cluttered with bullets that your poor old Xevious ship isn't nearly fast enough to dodge. I mean, I appreciate the precision that comes with slow movement, but the Xevious flies about as quick as the aforementioned lizardfish with 2/3 of a wing. Granted, sometimes you can still dodge your way to safety and leave ground targets intact, including the big mid-boss turrets. For some reason, this game is perfectly content in letting you just ignore most of the enemies. I don't see how this is conducive to defeating the Xevians, but at least you're required to blow up the huge mothership fortresses. Maybe that's where they keep their Wi-Fi routers, since I'd probably cancel the invasion too if I didn't have internet. Now, there are a few elements in Xevious that are just as baffling as the spelling of its name, like those spinning squares that occasionally appear out of nowhere to flank your ship for a few seconds, combine into a cube, and then just fly off the screen again. I would have been super confused by that, if I wasn't already too busy wondering why there aren't any Z's in Xevious. The game is pretty straightforward for the most part though, and the same can be said for its visuals. The terrain is always a standard forested path, with the occasional lake or paved runway, and the enemies are all just grayscale alien craft. I love the consistency though, and there's still enough variation between designs to keep them all interesting, especially the disappearing black orbs. To be honest, those things terrified me when I used to play this game as a kid. They would blink on and off all over the screen like some kind of sensory illusion, and it felt like I was being attacked by scary spectral beings that I could only see when they were a few inches away from me. There's not a whole lot going on here in terms of sound design. Just a start theme, a single endlessly looping background track, your cannon fire, and a couple different explosion noises. But the Spartan soundscape actually adds interest to the more unique audio cues, like the low, bassy hum of the big fortresses, which sounds legitimately threatening, and that fun extra life jingle, which I liked hearing even though I had no use for extra lives. See, I could only make it through a full loop of this game by setting my own save state checkpoints, basically cheating by swapping a handful of lives for unlimited attempts from wherever I put my last bookmark, and I really needed all those attempts, and several bookmarks per level, because Xevious gets real brutal, real fast. There was a secondary benefit to using save states too. Sometimes when you die in Xevious, it restarts you at the next level. It's nice for shortcuts, I guess, but I'd rather play through the whole game instead of skipping content, which you can't realistically do without either being so good that you never die, or by using save states to simulate that kind of perfect playthrough. The most novel aspect of Xevious is the dual weapon system. Since airborne enemies can't be defeated by bombs and ground-based enemies can't be defeated by your cannon, the game incentivizes you to get pretty proficient at using both simultaneously, which feeds into my favorite part of Xevious, trying to clear as many of the ground turrets as possible, especially when there are groups of 2 or 4 that can be blown up all at the same time with a well-placed bomb. If I could change one thing here, I'd label the levels somehow. I had to look up maps of the game just to figure out whether or not I'd actually looped it, since the terrain looks so similar throughout all 16 stages. Overall, Xevious is not only a genre-defining game, but a worthwhile playthrough in spite of its odd, over-evolved, under-evolved status. And in the same way I'm grateful those abomination fish lizard birds developed into you and me, I'm equally grateful that Xevious developed into the late 80s and early 90s space shooters that I love so much.